Welcome to episode 1 of Just the Game with BBZ and Brickpoker, myself. This is more of an introductory episode, getting to know Jordan a little bit more. I talk a little bit about myself. What you can expect from this podcast is us talking about a lot of poker-related topics, different conversations and debates that people might have that we give our own takes on, different strategy elements as well that we'll touch a little bit as well. And just to get to know Jordan more, give you a behind the scenes look of what happens at BBZ and learn a little bit more about ourselves. In this episode, what you're going to expect, or what you expect, is we talk a little bit about Jordan's upbringing, what he how he started off as a kid and what led to, get his success later in poker, how we got started with poker. We go into a little bit of other topics as well, his passion and love for combat sports, trains MMA. We talk a little bit about staking. It's a big part of how BBZ itself originated, the business itself. And yeah, it's just a great episode. There's a bit of a heavy moment that comes in near the end that I think you might have an interest in, you might like or dislike, but it was a great conversation we had. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get to our conversation with Jordan, BBZ Drummond. Okay, first episode. Here we go. So I wanted to kick it off. This is kind of an introductory episode, so we're just introducing ourselves. There's not much to say about me, so I'm going to let you lead it off.
Okay. My name's Jordan Drummond. I'm the CEO of BBZ Poker. I've been playing poker seriously playing poker since September or October, late September, early October of 2009. I played professionally, very actively for 5 years, basically, until 2014, where I was playing really, really actively. During that period, I started with $7. I never, redeposited to the site or anything. I turned $7 into $750,000. I started teaching a lot of people. I was eventually teaching and financing other people's gambling, so paying for their gambling in exchange for a share of their profits. I was eventually doing that with almost 200 people at one point, and together, combined, that collection of players invested about $150 million over a relatively long period of time. And then we were pretty successful doing it. We made, double-digit ROIs, which is pretty nice. And then we started selling the strategies on bbzpoker.com. So if people wanted to check it out, that's pretty much who I am professionally, right? I'm a dad. I have a wife. I'm married. I have a daughter. She's 7 years old. She's just finishing up grade 1 right now. And yeah, that's, I don't know what else you want me to say.
That's good.
That's most of who I am.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm going to ask some additional questions after anyways, with some of those topics. But yeah, just a little bit about me. I started playing poker back in 2015. So I'm the young gun that started out later as poker has progressed over the last 10, 15 years. It's a lot different now, and we'll have some fun discussions about that on, maybe how I came up is a lot different to how you came up.
Sure.
I wish my story was as cool as starting with $7 and turning it into, a $1 million business, but that's not my story. But yeah, I started playing in 2015, and then until about 2019 is, when you started streaming on Twitch and promoting the business a little bit more, and that's kind of when I started to get in contact with you and joined initially the CFP program when it started in 2019, and that's turned into you making the mistake of hiring me, and now we work together, and I co-manage one of the branches of the stables, BBZ Academy, and I coach, manage, and I do a lot of other things for the business on the back end and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm at. So to kind of pivot off what you said in the beginning about how you started. So what was the inspiration for poker? Because I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but obviously, part of what this podcast is going to be is listeners learning more about you and how you started, and can go into
Okay.
deeper conversations about that. So yeah, why don't you elaborate a little bit the what turned you on to poker initially?
Sure. So, if you go all the way back to when I was a kid, I played a card game called Magic the Gathering. So I played, yeah, I played that card game, and I was
What a
competitive with
nerd.
like, yeah, I was a nerd, and I was always like competitive with everything that I did. So like, there was like a store that sold the cards or whatever, and I would compete in tournaments at the store, right? So like the tournament buy-ins were like $5 or something. And if you won the tournament, you would get paid like whatever, $25. So they were like small sanctioned, like small unsanctioned gambling events. Um, and you would get paid in product at the store, right? So essentially, if there's like 10 people, there's a $50 prize pool, and you're basically just gambling for that $50. And then the way that the store makes it work is they pay you in product at the store, right? So I basically started gambling when I was like 9 years old, something like that. And yeah, I mean, like basically what ends up happening is you're like 12 years old, 13 years old, and I would win some of these tournaments. Like I did okay, and I wasn't like some pro or anything, but I did all right. And so I was making money technically, like in product, and you could fund your buy-ins through the credit that you received at the store too, right? So um, if you bought it for $5, if you won the tournament, you get maybe 10 people played, right? The winner gets all the money, so you get $50. And again, the store converts that $50 basically into product. So they basically sold $50 of product. That's why it makes sense for them. So they're hosting it with no rake, right? And then you can use the $5, the $50 that you win. You could use it to buy in next week, right? So you have 10 weeks of buy-ins. Plus, you could convert that money to product to the store. So I hopped these stores at like 9 years old. I would like hop to some of these stores, right? I would walk to them. I wouldn't get a ride. I would walk. Arizona's hot. It's a hard place to do long walks, but I would walk to these stores and I would play. And so yeah, so as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I started gambling more seriously, almost like a little more seriously, because there would be like poker games that would run like around those games. So essentially, like after the games were over at night, there would be poker games, and I don't know like when I started going to them, but I was like maybe 15 years old or something like that. And when I started going to like my first ones, so I started playing poker. My exposure to poker was at like a very young age. Now I wasn't playing like really seriously. I wasn't studying poker. I didn't give a rat's ass about poker, really, to be honest with you. I was there to play magic cards, but like it was just a gambling game that took place after hours. So I would play sometimes. And yeah, so like then I eventually moved to Canada, got a job. I was doing door to door sales, and we were broke. It was the winter time, and like I completely like magic cards was long since done. Um, Poker was like not a part of my life really at all. Um, I was just had a job, and I was doing door to door sales. It was the winter. We didn't do much business in the winter. Door to door sucks in Canada in the winter. So
Yeah.
yeah, like me, my brother, and my best friend, the guy that I was living with, I basically slept on. I lived at his house. Didn't pay rent. Didn't have enough money to pay rent. My responsibility was to buy the food. We were all broke, and yeah, we were watching television and we were smoking weed, and
That sums up every 19-year-old in Canada. So
yeah,
that's pretty
so
accurate. That's
yeah, so that's what we were doing.
Pretty normal.
Yeah, so I was like just this dumb kid, getting high and watching poker after dark and high stakes poker GSN, and like Tom Dwan asked for a reload at one point. He lost like 100K pot or something like that, and he asked for like another 100K. And I was like, bro, we're like the food choice that we were eating primarily was like ramen. We would get boiled eggs. We'd make boiled eggs. We would stick them in the ramen. Weren't even smart enough to make fried eggs and do it. And we were eating a lot of chicken burgers specifically because I was like, I could buy that stuff in bulk at Superstore. And like that was my diet. And it was pretty much the same food every day. And I was responsible for feeding myself, my brother, and my best friend, Alan. So yeah, when Tom DeWan asked for like 100K and he was just playing poker, I was like, dude, I could do this. Like in my head, right? I'm like, I could do this. So I started playing poker. Like in the winter, I wasn't working much. So I started playing poker. And like I had played like poker tournaments a little bit online. Like I don't know, played a little bit and I was winning. And but I had to withdraw all the money at some point. And so I stopped. And I started back up again in September. And I started with there was a guy from Arizona. I was in British Columbia at this time in my life, but there was a guy in Arizona who owed me $20. So I called him and I was like, "Yo, if you send me $20, like we're squared. Like, where's my money?" Because $20 was a lot of money at the time. And he's like, "I'll give you $7." So that's like the type of friends that I grew up with too, right? Like, he owes me 20. He's like, "I can give you 7." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So he sent me $7 on PokerStars, and yeah, and then I spun it up from $7. I had good bankroll management. I was playing like 1 cent games and 3 cent games, and then they had like either it was like 1 cent or 3 cent 360 mans. Those were like how I started, and then they had 25 cent 45 mans, and from 25 cent 45 mans, the next step up was $1, and I just went from like $7. I just kept kind of climbing up. $7, $20, $30, $50. At some point around $200, I had a break. I won some tournament or took second in some tournament for like $600 or $700, which is nice. And then by the end of like a month in September, or 2 months or something, or yeah, maybe end of the month in October or something like that, I'd made like $2,000, and I was like, "This is like what I'm making when I do door to door." And then, but I had more money now because I actually had a bankroll, right? I didn't have $7. I had 2 Gs. So I was like, well, if I could turn $7 into 2 Gs, I could probably turn 2 Gs into more. So, I decided to quit my job and go pro in which off of very little. In December, I started like making those plans and transitioning, and I planned on getting Supernova Elite, which meant paying in rake to PokerStars $180,000, and then they would give you back 120K US. So I was like, well, if I could pull off breaking even, all I have to do is work hard. I can work hard. All I have to do is work hard, and I'll have a 6-figure job playing poker. This is easy, no problem. So in January, I won like almost 10 grand or something, and then in February, I won almost 10 grand again, and then in March, I won almost 10 grand again, something like that. And then in April, either March or April or May, one of those months, like around there, I had a break-even month, and man, I was gutted because I was playing so much. I was just like, I was probably running so hot, I don't know, but like I had a break-even month after working like. I was playing 7 days a week. I was playing poker from when I woke up to when I went to sleep every day. And I had a break even month, and I just quit the Supernova Elite dream. I had like 30 or 40K, but I was just because I'd won so much. But I was just like, man, I can't get Supernova Elite. Like, I can't do this break even. Like, this is just horrible. This was so painful. And I played a lot for the rest of the year, but I bricked Supernova Elite that year. And by the end of the year, I had a 6-figure bankroll. And the next year, I got Supernova Elite. And then I did that 4 years in a row. So, yeah, that's the.
So when you started, what was the way you studied? Like, was it just going on forums? Because this is back in the day. Because you're going from playing, working door to door to just jumping straight into poker.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, right, I grew up where this was kind of where poker was becoming a new thing on Twitch. When I got out of high school, when I was like 18 years old, 19 years old, and I started to realize that this was an actual career opportunity. The way that I studied was, just you would go on Twitch, you'd see, guys like Lex, and at the time it was Jason Somerville with Run It Up. He was, kind of the first guy I watched playing poker, and, he's playing, 2 W Coop mixed game buy-ins for like 2K, 5K, whatever. And that's kind of how I realized. So yeah, Twitch, going on YouTube, that was kind of my thing. So what was your journey like getting better at the game?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say even before, because we were watching poker on TV, right? Like we were watching poker. It wasn't like we just watched it one day in September. Like I was watching poker on television because like it was just interesting to me. And so I've been watching it for a while. And I had subscribed to a website, Poker Savvy Plus. And so Poker Savvy Plus, it's a training site like bbzpoker.com is. They make a lot of content, right? They make a lot of content and they explain, what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? The tools were obviously way more primitive. The strategies were way worse, right? But these were guys who, like you, like Jason Somerville, like Lex, right? These are guys that were winning. They were beating the games, and I got to see how they were doing it, right? Now, I was playing sit and goes. So these guys were playing a different game. But a lot of these guys had the same origin story, right? So the origin story for a lot of these guys was like, okay, I started playing poker with sit and goes, but Then I moved over to cash games. I started playing poker with sit and goes, but then I moved over to MTTs. And I wasn't really studying the MTT stuff because I didn't trust it. And by didn't trust it, what I meant was the format was like, there would be some guy and he would like lose for forever and then he would win like, 300K. And I'd be like, well, maybe he got lucky. How do I know? Right. But these guys with cash game graphs, like these guys' graphs would go like this.
Oh,
right.
So you didn't trust it because of the format, not the actual material.
I didn't trust the format.
Okay.
I didn't trust that the player that was teaching it was any good.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
trust it.
Okay.
Right?
So that's interesting. That's interesting in itself that you're able to just be like, screw this guy. Doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm going to look at these cash game guys who are actually crushing it and making money and I'll follow them, which makes sense.
Yeah. So I was playing sit and go. So I was playing a format that was much more similar to MTTs.
Yeah.
But I was studying a different game, basically. I was studying cash games because I trusted the way that they thought more. It was more reliable to me that they were definitely crushing the games with the way that they thought, as opposed to the MTT players where maybe they were, but maybe they weren't. And I, didn't trust myself to be able to differentiate very well. And also, time's a precious commodity, right? Like I don't have time to like watch all the content and like figure out who the best guys are.
Yeah.
So like presumably there was some curating done, like some kind of vetting for like who they hired as coaches, right? But like you could shark scope them, you could look at their results, and you'd just be like, well, I don't know if this guy's good, man. Like I just don't know if he's good. So, but you would look at the cash game guys and it would be like, this guy's definitely good. This guy's definitely good. So, like Donnie Stern, Ansky, like there's just like all of them. So Foucault was a guy that I watched a lot at the time. And they were all like very quantitatively oriented, right? And the tournament guys weren't, right? They were the tournament guys were like, at the time, the tournament guys were like 4-betting like 7-2 off sometimes and stuff. Like they were just doing stuff that just like was harder to rationalize. And the cash game guys were just, like I said, very disciplined, like very quantitatively oriented. And it made more sense to me. And so I took that same methodology. I couldn't take the strategies like, line for line because we were playing different formats. But I took the same methodology from cash games to sit and goes. And then I had the thesis the whole time that like all the best players leave sit and goes. They all like move from sit and goes to cash games. They all move from sit and goes to MTTs. So why don't I just stay in sit and goes? They don't have to deal with playing the best players. so sit and goes appeared at the time to me to have a filter on it for the lowest level of competition. So I stuck with sit and goes. But yeah, that's how did I start and not just get crushed? The way I started and didn't just get crushed was that, I was watching content on Poker Savvy Plus.
That's cool. Yeah, very different to how I started. I basically just dove right in headfirst into MTTs, absorbing as much content as possible, and just grinding all day, every day for like a couple of years.
Yeah, you didn't find that terrifying? Like the
no, it was super terrifying and super stupid. Like I would say, I kind of got by for about 3 years. I'd say I was probably about a I was a profitable player, but not to the extent where this was, you would look from the outside and say, oh, he's actually doing well and making money. I'm kind of a psychopath. So I became obsessed with it. There was no plan B. It was just, I'm all in on this. And then that's why it was so great when I joined BBZ, because then I learned what the fuck to actually do. Sorry for cussing, but I'm going to keep cussing until somebody pays me not to.
Sure.
So that's basically me, and it was just absorbing. So that's when I joined, BBZ. It was great because then you learn more about the other things that you don't think about when you're trying to pursue the game, like variance, which is probably a great topic to talk about, because not a lot of people really, and I mean really, understand variance. Because the question that has always gotten asked to some guys that stream on Twitch is like, oh, who do you think the best player is? And the answer is you really don't know, because you can't really judge it fully based on a graph, you would say. I think you'd agree with that, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so, I think I saw a post, I think it was Pads the other day, We talked about it briefly. But they kind of had all the GTO bots. They all the same win rates, but they played against each other. And it was about a 1.5 to 2 year sample for an MTT player.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those bots just got absolutely murdered.
Yep.
Like he made about, I shouldn't say he, the bot made about close to nothing, which is very depressing if you're a human and you're playing for so long and yield no results. So yeah, it's just crazy. And that's like, I'd say the main thing that I did not learn about until I joined. That was one of like the bigger things, because it's not something that you learn on a training site. So why I liked BBZ so much and getting involved in the staking side is you're teaching people all these other things about being a pro, which is what I didn't know. All I knew was just play the game and results will come.
Sure.
You keep improving. You know, hopefully things turn for the better. But that's not how it works.
Not always. Not always.
No.
Yeah, you gotta, people who are aspiring pros or even like just trying to make money. There's a lot of volatility, and you can do things to try to tighten that volatility band, right? So I didn't look at Paz's experiment, right, which presumably was run through Prime Dope for people that want to run their own experiments. But
yeah, I don't know if he actually did it. It was a post and I saw it. I don't know who actually ran it, but
yeah, it's an easy experiment to run. I'm sure it was him.
Yeah,
doesn't take much. You don't have to. He could do it. And when you do that, what's interesting is like depending on how many buy-in levels he incorporated into his experiment. If he built an actual playing schedule, which almost no one ever does, then the volatility is much worse than he probably modeled out, right? Like if he didn't do that, if he didn't build an actual playing schedule. So like what most people do is like, which is not, I'm not blaming Pat, it's just economic in terms of time. But what most people do when they look at the variance, like the volatility profile on Prime Dope, is they like put in maybe one buy-in, which would be a huge mistake. Like if you just say, hey, if I'm playing a $100 average buy-in, so let me just put in $100 tournaments and I play 10,000 of them, what happens? The problem is that massively understates the volatility profile, because if you have because all the tournaments are the same buy-in, right? So in reality, if you're running really good in $10 tournaments and you're playing $1,000 tournaments and you're losing the $1,000 tournaments, but you're running good in the $10 ones, you're getting crushed way worse than a one buy-in model would assume, right? And so if you start putting in like $10 tournaments, $20 tournaments, $30 tournaments, $50 tournaments, $100 tournaments, 200s, 500s, 1Ks, and if you play 2Ks, 5K, right, then the volatility is just exploding, right? Because all that really matters at that point is how you do in 25Ks, right? So depending on how big you play. So yeah, it's that's the nature of the game. And the other formats are a little kinder in terms of volatility, right? So like cash games are a little bit nicer to you. Sit and goes are a little bit nicer to you. But MTTs are a very intimidating beast, especially if you don't try to tame them at all. So if you don't take into account, hey, there's this thing called variance, what can I do about it? Then you'll get hurt by it for a little while until you figure out something to do about it, I would say.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing too, is when for what it's worth, I think the experiment, I don't know if it was physical tournaments. I believe it was each bot had a 5 BB per 100. And then after it was about 1.5 million to 2 million hands, one of the bots had a break even.
Yeah, that sounds like one buy-in level.
Or like, yeah, one buy-in level is probably what it was. But yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, that's going to really understate the variance. But go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just going to say the scary thing about, when you're trying to become if you're an aspiring player and you want to make this a career, what's tough is when you deal with those tools like Prime Dope or Poker Dope, whatever it's called, that you could also assume what your ROI is, which I think is dangerous, because it's different when you are looking at your win rate versus your ROI. Because if your sample is 3,000 tournaments and you're winning for a 20% ROI, but your win rate's low, it's hard to kind of figure that out as a human, I guess. Swallow that pill to actually figure out. And that's why people hire you, because then you actually diagnose the situation and figure out actually you're running really well, but your win rate's not that great. We need to improve it before it goes bad.
Yeah. Usually it's gone bad when I get hired, but sure.
Yeah.
Usually the guys at the top of the mountain, they're like, oh, nothing can go no wrong until they fall. Then I get the call. But occasionally, Peter TV actually, they're at the top of the mountain and they're like, I've won a bunch of money. I don't know what to do. I'm not that confident. and then they come talk to me. And it's really smart when that happens,
Yeah,
because
that's cool.
yeah, because he didn't get crushed first. But most of the time, I get a phone call at the bottom.
Yeah.
I get the call after they've fallen.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. I'm gonna go into another thing here, which I
Sure.
find personally interesting, because what I've realized after, like I would say, maybe like the last year, is how you balance everything. Because you're not just a coach; you do a lot of other things aside from that. Even behind the scenes, with BBZ, but and other things like maybe not a lot of people know, but you do a lot with investing and whatnot.
Mhm.
So yeah, I wanted you to just talk about a little bit how you try to find the balance and everything, because obviously how hard it is to, let's say, become a professional poker player. Well, then you realize how hard it is to become good at anything. So then when you try
Sure.
and juggle running a business, managing a
Mhm.
portfolio, coaching people,
Mhm.
how do you balance all of that?
Well, fortunately, there's an interplay between some of those things. So, um, yeah. So when it comes to running the business, right? For example, the business spins off of me knowing how to play no limit hold'em. So in some way, I have to practice, right? And I get to decide how I'm going to practice. I can study in a room by myself with no return attached to it, which sounds like a pretty bad way to practice. I could play a lot, right? Which is a really viable way to practice. It's how most people practice. um, or you can coach, right? All three the would technically would like theoretically all three would work, right? If you just like drilled at home alone and never played, but you ran tons of sims and you were constantly a trainer, you still probably you get a pretty good technical understanding of the game. If you play a lot and then you study off the tables and you try to work on a game, that's the traditional way to get better. That's how I started. That's how I got better. That obviously works. That's almost everybody does it. And then there's the third way where you could coach and put in hours. If I don't coach or play, I'm going to suck eventually, right? So like there is a responsibility for me to like maintain my competency, maintain my skill set, um, and that just requires a certain amount of dedication and a certain amount of hours. So it probably would to maintain would probably take something like 20 hours a month from based on some of the things that I've read. Probably maybe less, but at the level that I understand the game at, it would probably take more than other skill sets. So maintenance is probably 20 hours minimum, and then to continue to improve is going to take more than that. So I try to do anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week of coaching, um, and that's just coaching. So that's just like me with a student, me with a horse, me with a CFP, me with a streamer, someone strategically important to the business, right? And so like that's just me getting better at poker, me like maintaining my skill set, and me monetizing that while I do it. Running the business, it depends on what's going on, right? Building products takes a lot of time. So building a course takes a lot of time. Something breaking takes a lot of time. But a large part of the business at this point is automated in terms of delegated. Delegated is a better word. It's done by people close to me. Um, so I don't have to do that much. Now, in the beginning, when I was first starting with everything, I had to do more. Um, and my personal life suffered as a result of it, but it's okay. Like you don't have to do that for forever. It's a part of getting really good at something is like you let it consume you, right? And there's a trade-off, which is I want to get really good at this thing, so I'm going to let it consume me, and then by the time I'm finished, I'll be really good at it, and then I'll get my life back. So there's a trade, and you might not know you're making the trade, but that's still the trade that's happening. And people who like want to be balanced with their life the whole time, they're never going to get they're probably never going to get like really elite at something, which is
Yeah.
okay. You don't have to get really elite at something, but if you want to get really elite at something, that's the trade-off you're probably going to have to make for a limited period of time. Yeah, and so 30 hours of the coaching, 10 to 20 hours of the business. More if something bad happens. I got audited. We can talk about that at some point. I got audited last year. That was something bad that happened. That increased my workload to like 80 hours a week for a month, as everything was prepared and we dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's, make sure everything was exactly where it should be, so that we were prepared for audit. Because I wasn't running the business prepped for audit, so like preparing it took some time, um, and yeah, and so something bad happens or whatever, something else breaks inside the business, it takes a bunch of time, and you just do what it takes. There's no like compromising. There's no, well, I'm only going to work 40 hours this week. Like you're going to just work until it's done. Like the only thing that I have to do is eat food and sleep. So, as long as depending on the severity of what's going on, right? If the severity is more modest, right, then my ideal life is, again, those 30 hours of coaching, 10 to 20 hours on the business. That's 50. The portfolio is, again, like another, 10 to 20 hours. That's 60 to 70. But the work is variable. So because the work is variable, like in the sense that like it's different types of work, right? It's not monotonous. I don't get bored. So the coaching itself is variable. Different people. I'm not like flipping cans on an assembly line, right? It's different people. They're different poker problems. So it's engaging. It's stimulative. I can do it for a long period of time. It's fine. Then the business, right? Same thing, right? The business is dynamic. It's different people. We're trying to accomplish different goals with the business. So it's stimulative. So there's no problem there either, right? And then the portfolio, same thing. Different businesses that I'm investing in and researching. Stimulative, right? So it sounds like a lot of work to do those things, but it's not. I can still read on top of all of that. I can still do jiu-jitsu on top of all of that. I drop my daughter off at school every morning. I pick her up from school every day. I take her to all her sports practices. Right. I watch every soccer practice that she has. I watch every game she has. We practice every day in the carport. Right. So like I still have time to like be dad and do all those other things. It sounds like it's more work than it is. But I don't waste time. So everything is deliberately done. Right. So I'm not going to like watch TV by myself. I can watch TV, right? I'll just watch it with my wife and daughter and I'll spend time with them by watching television. I can play a video game, right? I could play Mobile Legends or Halo or something with my wife, right? As like a way to spend time with her on the couch. But I'm not going to like do that by myself and waste that time, right? So, yeah, I would just like, I have like entertainment is a part of my life, but I'm strategic about like how and deliberate about how I entertain myself and when I do it. So like everything's just like, accounted for. It's not like I live on a schedule, not really, but I just
I mean, I've seen your schedule. It looks like you live on a schedule, to be honest.
Yeah, but I don't really. I mean, like it's pretty open-ended. I just don't like wasting time.
Yeah, for sure. No, I understand that because then you don't want a day because you'll just think of if a day goes by where you do nothing, which I feel like probably hasn't happened in a very long time or at all.
Yeah, no, not a day. No, yeah. No.
Mm-mm. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I super interesting because like I said before, right? How hard it is to get good at one thing. So trying to, I know we're doing a lot of work on the back end to just improve the business and stuff, and you've been absorbing a lot of content to try and do that as well. So when it came to, when you took on managing a portfolio, you did the same thing. I'm assuming you just, kind of filled yourself with as much content as possible from really high level guys or read books, whatnot. So it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's tough, but there's just like, there's not like you have a choice, right? Like you get presented with problems in life, right? And then you solve them. So now obviously like when things are going well, you have a different problem than when things are going badly, but it's still a problem. So everything that I was doing was working. So, which is great, right? Like, but so poker was working. I made a lot of money playing poker. Staking went really well, right? We made a lot of money staking, and the staking business runs into a constraint. Okay, so when you have zero, if you want to go into staking and you don't back any players, and I should explain what staking is. Staking is just when, let's say, Jake wants to play poker, Jake can go play poker, and let's say Jake is pretty good, but he has no money. So I can give Jake money, and then Jake can play poker, but I'm not going to give him money for free. So if Jake loses, I'll give him more money. So I'll pay for 100% of Jake's losses. But in exchange for me doing that, Jake's going to give me 50% of any profits we make. So if he loses, $500, I'll send him another $500. And then if he wins $1,000, he has to pay the first 500 back that he borrowed, or that he lost. Sorry, right? He pays the first 500 back that he lost, and then we split the next 500 50-50. So that's how staking works, right? And then we just keep going incrementally, from one to the next, right? And we just keep working through it. So that was working. I had money coming out of that, and as a result, you start with 0 horses, right? Zero, we call the players we stake horses. Okay. So I started with 0 horses. Then you have 1. Then you have 5. Then things are going well. You have 20. Then you have 100. Then you have 150. Then you have 200. Okay. And you just keep getting more and more and more players. But there comes a point where you can't really get more players, right? You have 200 players, and basically there's an attrition rate and there's a growth rate, right? How quickly can you add new players, and how quickly are players leaving the existing business, right? And I never got past 200, which just meant that like at 200, I didn't really reach an equilibrium either, because at 200 I peaked and it kind of started to slow down a little bit, and I kind of reached an equilibrium around 150 players. I've reached 150 staked players multiple times, but I've never sustainably been above that number. So 150 players is basically like the equilibrium. The rate at which I'm adding players and then players are leaving is the same. So like, at 150. So if I add 5 players every month, 5 players are leaving every month, and that eventually we reach some kind of homeostasis around 150 players, some kind of equilibrium at that level. So what was the question again? I'm trying to explain how this works, and then I got lost.
Well, I think you kind of just went on your own tangent there, because
I do that sometimes.
I didn't really necessarily ask a question. I was kind of just pointing something up, but that's fine. I think it was cool, because we didn't really discuss what exactly staking was, so that was cool.
Oh yeah, so I was just explaining how staking works.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. I had a question, but then I kind of blanked on it, but I'm going to move on. And if it comes back to me, I'll come back to it.
My brain flips around sometimes, so that's just
I know. I had it, and while you were rambling, and then you stopped, and it's gone.
Sure.
What I think is kind of interesting, because I've had, some of my own students that play on the BBZ Academy side ask me this, and I see debates on it on poker Twitter. I don't really pay that much attention to poker Twitter. I don't really give a shit, but a lot of people talk about GTO versus exploitative. So that's why, to be honest, we're such big fans of the AI getting involved, because it's just like a better tool to study. I think we can both agree has more of a human element to it, a more realistic strategy, rather than just, looking at a solver that, when it, I guess, doesn't want to have a specific strategy, it'll just balance the whole thing. Because I mean, the idea of a GTO strategy is to be unexploitable. So how would you define, and if I said something wrong there, feel free to correct me. But what is the ideal player in the year 2024? Is it a combination of both, or is it kind of one or the other?
So what's the ideal player in 2024? I mean, you want to have a pretty firm understanding of how the game works. Exploiting versus GTO is like sort of a moot point. I mean, the guy that's playing a GTO strategy is trying not to make mistakes. Like the person who's like, if you're talking about the goal for like, why does a GTO strategy exist? Like for a human player, like why are you pursuing that? It's because you are a human and you play the game badly, right? So you're making a lot of mistakes. And like the idea is that if you just made less mistakes, you would make more money. So in 2024, it's the same goal. Like you're still just trying to play better so that you make less mistakes. The thing about the tools that exist now is that you can change the strategies very fluidly. Like you can change the strategies very quickly, and you can see how that changes your behavior, how things move around. And so you just have a better understanding of the game, because you can play with things more. I mean, like there's just, if I tweak, okay, so this is what it's telling me, but what if I change this by a little bit? What if I change the bet size that it's using here? Then what happens? What if I force it to check its range instead of mixing it a little bit, instead of donk betting? What if I do this? What if this happens? And your ability to experiment and learn, that's what they're trying to accomplish when they build these tools, right? They're trying to help you learn how the game works faster and faster and faster. And they're doing that. I mean, I guess, again, what's the ideal player in 2024? Is he exploitative or is he GTO? I mean, he just has a firm understanding of how the game works, and exploitative opportunities don't come up all the time. Okay. I mean, like that's like for an exploitative opportunity to exist, one of two things is going to arise, right? Either you're going to directly observe someone making some sort of mistake on the table, and then you can capitalize on that mistake, which by definition takes time. Okay. Or you're going to make assumptions about like how your current metagame plays, and then exploit that. And those assumptions will be better if you have a lot of data, and they'll be pretty poor if you don't have much data. Most people aren't working with a lot of data on how their metagame plays. So for most people, that type of exploitation isn't really available. For most people, without like some kind of cheating where they go and they purchase data mined hands from some third party, and they pay crypto for it, and like that's not really my recommended path for getting better at poker. But and so so like your ability to first observe a mistake, you have to be able to identify that. First, a mistake has to happen, so a sufficient number of hands have to take place, right, in order for the person to make a mistake. Then you have to observe it, right? You have to have conviction that that mistake will be repeated, and then you have to know what to do about it. That's fine. I mean, it happens all the time. Like it sounds like a bunch of conditions have to be met, so it never happens. It does happen. It's just not the base case answer, right? Like when you fold 7-2 offsuit under the gun, first to act in a tournament, that's GTO. That's why you fold it. It's GTO. You know that opening that hand will lose you money, right? And you keep folding, right? You're not going to open 7-3 offsuit either, but that's also GTO, right? So I don't care who you are. Like 99% of the plays you make will be GTO. Like they're just going to be in agreement with a solver. Solver's going to do the same thing. Solver's going to fold 7-2 off. Solver's going to fold 9-3 off, right? And then like when you play a lot of hands, if you see something to exploit, you know that you can exploit it. You know that this mistake's going to be repeated. You know the guy does certain things. Yeah, take advantage of it. I mean, like that's common sense. The confusion happens, I think, for people when they juxtapose, when they when they pit these two ideas against one another. They're missing the point, which is that like you can't escape that like 99% of your decisions ish. I'm just making that number up, but the majority of your decisions by an overwhelming amount will not be exploitatively based decisions. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the best exploitative poker player on the planet. Most of your decisions won't really be like exploitatively based where you're basing it off of what the other guy's doing. Most of them will just be like, common sense. Like I'm not, GTO. I'm not going to open 9-5 offsuit from under the gun. It's going to lose money. So, that's why people who are learning poker, who don't know how it works, should learn that. And yeah, I mean, like if some guy's like, drunk and he's shoving all in with 7-2 offsuit and 8-3 offsuit, 9-3 offsuit, and you see him do that a couple hands, then he shoves all in and you fold king 10 suited, you suck because that's a call, right? If you're going to shove 7-2 offsuit, you have to call with king 10 suited, right? Like you're not waiting for aces and kings, which would be a GTO strategy against someone who's shoving nothing, right? You're not going to wait. You're just going to call with like jack 10 suited, going to call with jack 6 suited, jack 7 suited, right? If he's actually shoving dark. So, yeah, I mean, like that's how the game works. So sometimes there's something to exploit. You play exploitatively. Most of the time, there's not. So you play GTO.
Yeah, I feel like why this debate even became a thing is partially because people I want to say maybe the word GTO is somewhat intimidating to people, maybe, or just the fact that there's this solver that is solving the game, quote unquote. Because if you're not trying to never mind. I was gonna say something, maybe not, but basically, yeah, so for people that maybe have been in the game for a long time and their poker to them is just playing with their friends in the backyard or just going to the casino and playing 1-3, and they've been doing it for years. So I feel like that's maybe where the actual debate itself came from. And a lot of people are just intimidated. You see it all the time, people just saying, I don't play GTO, but it's kind of
no, I mean, I know it's common, like I know that people think that way, but I think that those people, a large fraction of those people are doing the best they can to play GTO strategies. They're just doing it so badly that that they think that that's not what they're doing, but that is what they're doing. Like if you watch some guy on Twitch and that guy on Twitch is watching some training content somewhere, that guy is trying to play a GTO strategy. You watch him on Twitch. You're trying to copy what he's doing. You're playing a GTO strategy. Then you go to your game, your cash game, and you have no idea where the source of the information came from. So you're like, I'm just freestyling it, bro. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not just freestyling it. Like you didn't just figure out that when you open from early position in the big blind calls, like you should bet a lot. Like you didn't just figure that out. Like you didn't do that. You're not that smart. You got that idea from somewhere, right? And like that emerges from tools, right? And like if you keep iterating it back. And like the source of like how most of the decisions get made is tools. So So like, and it's not really like debatable. I mean, like, people like to debate it, but they're not really debating anything. Again, like the minority of decisions can be exploitably, grounded decisions, and they should be. I don't think that anybody that really understands how poker works at all would say that, like, if someone's doing something that you can obviously take advantage of because it's bad, that you just shouldn't do it because you should stick to GTO. Like, nobody's going to say that. That's not an argument that anyone's making. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's like a really, casual player argument kind of thing that doesn't really like happen at higher limits. I think it's a tactic that certain people prey on to sell people products, which is fine. Like it's like buzzword like that you can use to sell stuff, but it's not like, I don't think that you're gonna like hear two guys debate how to think about a hand and like, they're gonna disagree because it's like GTO versus exploit. Like if the guy's got a good exploit, like you should use it. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
that guy's gonna win. So yeah.
All right. So to pivot off of poker for a little bit, I did remember one question I had, because part of this episode was kind of just, getting to know you more. Where did the inspiration come from starting to train BJJ? Because I know you actually used to wrestle as a kid, I'm pretty sure, in high school. Is that correct?
Yeah, briefly. Yeah, that's good memory, or like whatever you did for research. That's pretty good. But yeah, I did wrestle very badly for like a year and a half, maybe, or something like that in high school. I lost every match for the whole season until there was a tournament, and my stepdad showed up, and then I took second in the tournament. I beat, like, I don't know, I won like 6 matches or something like that, and then I lost, in the finals or whatever. But yeah, so I was a bad wrestler, and then what ended up happening was I had sort of a personal experience, which I'll still talk about. But it was like, basically, there was this. I rented a house. Okay, I rented a house. I had just had my daughter, so she was, I don't know, 1 or 2 years old or something like that. And we were renting a house. And so previously, I'd rented an apartment. We moved to a bigger house in a new neighborhood, great neighborhood, beautiful area. Okay, very close to where I live now, beautiful area. And there was this guy named Daryl. That's his actual name, but his last name I don't know, and so it doesn't matter. But his name's Daryl, and Daryl was working on a house in the area. He didn't live there. He lived there temporarily. Somebody was in the hospital and was very old and very sick, and Daryl was related to them, and so he was like house sitting for these people and doing work on the house. Okay, now Daryl was an interesting character, and I can't prove that Daryl did this, but all of a sudden at night, I'm in bed sleeping with my daughter and my wife. Okay, so me, my wife, my daughter, same bed, because we couldn't do the different bed thing. My daughter would start in her crib and then eventually end up in our bed.
Wander over.
And yeah, so the three, not walk over, just cry, and then we would just pick her up and pass out. Yeah, pass out in the bed. So my daughter's like 9 months old or a year old or something like that at this point. And there's a knock on the door at 3:00 in the morning. And
that's not.
Like, I don't even think it's like someone knocking on the door, but like the knock gets more persistent. And so like I'm asleep, wake up, go downstairs, open the door. There's a very scantily clad woman knocking on my door. My wife's in bed with me. I'm asleep. There's a half naked woman outside my house at 3:00 in the morning. And I'm like, can I help you? And she's like, I'm here for you. And I'm like, here for who? My wife's upstairs in bed, and if she thinks you're here for me, I'm dead. So you're not here for me. And so I send her away, obviously, right? And like I don't really think anything of it. I'm like, you made a mistake. 2 days later, 3:00 in the morning, knock on the door. This time, the woman was irate, by the way. The first woman, she was not happy. So second time, I go downstairs again. Woman gets pissed off again because I have to send her away. I'm like, wrong house. Sorry to disappoint. Wrong house. 3 days later, another knock on the door. Woman, no clothes. This time, because the woman got really upset the first 2 times. Different women, by the way. Different women both times. Mm-hmm. But this time, third woman, I don't go downstairs. Why not? Because my wife's like, look, these women are getting super pissed because there's a guy answering the door. So I'll answer the door. I'm like, I don't know if that's safe. She's like, I'll answer the door. They'll be chill. So my wife answers the door, and the woman's like, oh my God, you're a woman. And like my wife's like, yeah, like, can I help you? And she's like, no, I don't think so. I must be at the wrong house. Totally different reaction. Totally different reaction to when I answer the door.
Yeah.
So this goes on for like, I'm not exaggerating, like 2 months, almost 3 months.
Oh shit. Okay, that's
So yeah, so like at some point, Daryl is having like legal issues. Like police are going to his house or something like that. And they've been to his house multiple times. He's having problems with his girlfriend. They got into a fist fight. And so I still don't know if it was Daryl, right? But I eventually go knock on Daryl's door. It doesn't take 2 months either. Somewhere along this journey,
yeah.
I go knock on Daryl's door. And I'm like, listen, bro, I don't know if it's you, but everybody in this neighborhood is older. Okay, so these houses, each house that I'm renting this house, I don't own it, but every single house in this neighborhood is worth over $3 million, like $2.5 to $3 million. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, there's no chance, bro. Like, the only guy that makes sense to be doing this is you. Like, you're the only guy that makes sense to be doing this. Listen, I don't care what you're doing. Like, if you want to send girls, just send them to your house. Like, send them to the next door neighbor's house. Send them to some old person's house. I have a like a 7-month-old baby in the house. I need these girls to stop coming to my house. And the next 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we get a break. A month later, girl knocks on the door again. My wife goes downstairs, sends her away. Next day, girl comes down to the house, knocks on the door, and it goes away. Okay. But then all of a sudden, my next door neighbor, my other neighbor, he comes over. He's like, yo, man, are those girls still coming to your house? I'm like, they took a break, but they're back, kind of, yeah. He's like, dude, a girl showed up at my house and she took a bat to all my security software.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, holy smokes, bro. I'm like, sorry, man. But yeah, the girls are still coming to my house too. I don't know what to tell you. And so they started going to his house though, just as often as mine. So like I would get a break for like a month, for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they would go to his house. So that's like, at this point, I'm speaking with the landlord because I'm like, I have a lease that I can't breach without losing like, I don't know, 15, 20 grand, something like that. Like,
yeah.
It's like a bunch of money if I break it this early. So I don't want to do that, but I'm like, listen, this is a huge problem for me. Like my life's being ruined. Like I can't sleep at night. I'm stressed out because this stuff's happening. And like, I got to move. And so I'm like, I'm going to pay the money, whatever it is, I'll pay it to like get out of here. But like, this sucks. So then what ends up happening is one day my wife's at work. She's a nurse. It's 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that in the afternoon. So you asked me why I learned jiu-jitsu. Eventually we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So 11 o'clock in the morning, something like that, 1 o'clock, whatever. This time there's no girl. This time there's a guy. And the guy is covered in tattoos. And he's not that small of a guy either. And the guy knocks on the door. I answer the door with my daughter in my arms, getting kind of choked up thinking about this, to be honest with you. I answer the door with my daughter in my arms, and the guy's like, yo, where's some girl's name? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where she is. And the guy's like, we're gonna have. He's like, she didn't come home last night. I'm like, dude, I don't know who your girl is. Now I'm pissed because I got my daughter in my arms. This dude's trying to cause me a problem. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. And I coming from like a little bit of a tougher background. I didn't really know how to fight scientifically the way I know how to fight now.
Yep.
But I wasn't used to like getting pushed around. So I was like, and I had my daughter in my arms. And so like, this is an emotional conversation. It was an emotional time when it happened. So he's like, she never came back last night. And I'm like, bro, I don't know where your girl is, but she's not here and she didn't come to my house. This is the wrong house. She probably went to that house. And I pointed at Daryl's house. And I'm like, she probably went to that guy's house. Because I've been having girls here and I tried to explain to him, he's like, dude, bro, I don't care what it is. If my girl doesn't show up tomorrow morning, I'm going to have a crew run through this house. And now I have a different kind of problem.
Yeah, that's
so
heavy.
Yeah. So at that point, I moved my wife and daughter out of the house. So my wife and daughter went back to stay with her parents. I flew up a buddy of mine, and he came and he stayed in the house with me. And so we stayed for a bit. And then one day I was at my buddy had to go back eventually. So he stayed at the house with me for like a week or something like that. And in case some crew came. Yep. And then I was at my in-laws' house where my wife and daughter were staying. And we have cameras at the house, obviously, at this point. Obviously, it's the minimum you could do. Police had been to the house a bunch of times and stuff like that, too.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a guy at the house. and it's like, I don't know, it's like 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, something like that. There's a guy at the house, not the same guy, different guy. A guy at the house with a girl. So I call the police. So I'm at my in-laws' house. I call the police, and I'm like, okay. I call 911, right? Call 911. I'm like, hey, there's a guy at my house right now, and he's some kind of pimp or gangster. I don't know which one of the two he is. Here's what I do know. I'm going to kill him. So if you don't go to my house, this guy's going to die. So I go to my house, and there's like 7 police cars at my house. So, which makes sense, because that response means that they're going to be there immediately. Unfortunately, they didn't get the guy. So, and I was driving. Like, I went from my in-laws' house, which is like 25 minutes away or something. I got to my house in 7 minutes. I drove like 160 kilometers an hour through side streets, which is really dangerous, but I didn't care at the time. Trying, because I was going to kill him. So, and he wasn't even the guy that was causing me all the problems. I was probably Daryl. So I went to Daryl's house. I talked to Daryl again. Daryl eventually left. As soon as Daryl left, problem stopped. So Daryl left. Like, my wife and daughter were staying at my in-laws' house until it stopped. And then it stopped. And my landlord was actually really nice. They gave me a break on the rent. I was like, yeah, I'm not even living in the house. Like, I'll still pay half of it, but like, there's nobody living in that house. I'll maintain it, but like, I'm not living in that house. My wife and kid are living in that house. So at that point, like, I wanted to learn how to fight.
Yeah.
Like, more seriously.
Self-defense.
So,
type.
yeah. And like, you could say, like, go get a gun, sure. Like, but I just wasn't comfortable in my own skin anymore. And yeah, I just wanted to learn how to fight. So I started training jiu-jitsu. So now I train jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, wrestling. And
you're pretty into the UFC and stuff. Like, it's a pretty big hobby of yours. To switch to a more positive side of the conversation, because I didn't think it was gonna get that dark. I actually did not know that all that happened. It's kind of messed up.
That's what happened. So that's why, why did Jordan learn how to fight? Yeah, because like, I felt uncomfortable just walking around. It took me a long time to be able to sleep at night, like through a night. Like, I would wake up at night, because it would happen all the time, right? It's almost like a torture.
Oh yeah, it's
like
crazy.
After it would when it wouldn't happen, I would wake up and think someone knocked on the door. I would just like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, shoot out of bed, thinking someone had knocked on the door, and my wife would feel me jump out of bed, and she'd be like, "Babe, no one knocked. Let's go back to sleep." I'd be like, "Okay." And then like this kept I would wake myself up like this for like probably like 6 months after. And then we eventually, like, we bought a house, we moved, whatever. And then like, I sleep through the night now. So yeah. But yeah, I love UFC, man. Fuck, that stuff's awesome. So yeah, I mean, like, it's great. I enjoy training. Training's great. I take it super seriously. I try to train if I'm healthy and I have time, I'll train like 10 to 12 hours a week. I broke my nose training. I twisted like all the way off the side of my face. We put it back in, which is nice. It doesn't look the same, but it doesn't look too bad. Like, I train a lot. I train really seriously. Been training for like 3 years. And yeah, I'm much more sophisticated now than I was when I walked in through the door, for sure. So yeah, that's the genesis of why I started training.
Yeah, because I never knew if it was something like that, or it's just, I want to get healthier, more active. I know for me, it's not as physically intense, but I wanted to start exercising more, and I'm passionate about golf, as I've told you before. Nobody knows. I love golf. I started taking lessons. They're actually quite intensive compared to just playing. They're probably more intensive than actually just playing in these lessons. And it's just like a great way of exercising, because I used to go to the gym. I hated it.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm like, I'd rather play a sport. Like, I mean, I used to play basketball. I used to play baseball. I used to play sports all the time as a kid, soccer, European football, whatever you want to call it. But golf is my thing right now. And it's just, I didn't know if you started training because of that. Because I did know you liked MMA. You do actually started betting into it. Maybe you could talk about a little bit of that, like how you got into actually betting, which I think is like pretty standard. I mean, if you gained an edge in playing poker and making a living from poker, you could say, I kind of want the competitiveness in you is like, I want to see if I can, make an ROI off of actually betting in UFC.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if we're just talking about the sports betting side of it, that sort of comes out of almost like Ape Styles asking me a question once. So John Van Fleet, another popular streamer. and BBZ coach. But Ape Styles asked me one day, he's like, "What do you think?" We were at lunch. We used to get lunch all the time. So Ape Styles used to live really close by, and we would get lunch. We would go for sushi all the time. And he asked me at lunch one day, he's like, "What do you think the biggest mistake you've made with money was?" And I thought about it, and I was like, the biggest mistake I don't make that many, like, at the time. I'm a little bit more careless with my money now. At the time, I didn't make many mistakes with my money. So the biggest mistake I made with my money, and I thought about it, and I was like, well, remember when Floyd Mayweather fought Conor McGregor? So this was after that.
Yep.
And he said, yeah. I said, I didn't bet like $150,000 on that. I didn't bet anything on that. And I should have, because Conor McGregor was never going to win that boxing match. There's just no way. They're like, the best boxer on planet Earth is going to fight some guy that's not a professional boxer and then somehow lose. So I didn't think that Floyd Mayweather could even figure out how to lose. So I just thought that the odds were just wrong. So I just felt like the odds were wrong. When I looked at it, I looked at what the odds were. I thought that they were wrong.
What was it? It was like 10%. It was like 10 or 16%. Like, it was super low, but like
still too high.
Yeah, like that.
It was above 1%. The odds were above 1%. Like, the probability that he was going to win was above 1, which was probably too high.
Right.
Yeah. So like, puncher's chance, and like that's why the odds exist. So I don't think he had a puncher's chance. I don't think he had like a 2% chance at winning that fight. So so I told him that I made that mistake, and then so that made me, like, at that point I was like more open. I was already doing a lot in markets, right, stock markets, and things like that, and I'd also already been like mildly successful at that point there. So I was comfortable making bets outside of poker, and then I started getting into fighting more, and I'm pretty picky about making sure that I think the bet's mispriced before I bet. I don't bet just because I want a sweat, for example.
Right.
I do enjoy the fight more when I have a bet on it. But
as you should, yes.
Yeah, but I only I try to be disciplined about only betting if I think the bet is mispriced. Right. So I think that the bet is undervalued, basically. That the odds that something happens, right? I'm not betting on my favorite fighter. I'm not betting on who I think is going to win, right? I'm betting that the fighter is going to win, or something else, some other outcome associated with the fight is likely to happen. And I'm very familiar with, like, pretty intimately familiar with all the statistics that drive. I have a spreadsheet that I consult regularly. I've memorized most of it by now because I've consulted it enough.
Like, projections or past
historical data. Historical data. Spreadsheet of historical data for, like, how often fighter, like, heavyweight fighters win by knockout. How often heavyweight fighters win by submission? How often featherweights win? How often fights go past round 2? How often How often fights go past round 2 with this weight class? How often fights go past round 2? Those types of statistics, right?
Yeah.
So I have, like, a pretty, not like huge or anything, but like I have a reasonable amount of statistics. And then I have, like, a reasonable knowledge of the fighter, like, the fighters that I'm going to bet on, right? I'll go rewatch their fights and things like that, right? So I have, like, a reasonable knowledge of the fighters that I'm going to bet on. I have a pretty decent knowledge of the statistics around the different outcomes that are associated with this. So, like, base case probabilities of what's going to happen. And then I look at what's being laid in terms of the price for the fight and how I think about it. And if I think that there's something that's inappropriate, then I bet against it, basically. Which is, like, really not very different than the process that I use to invest in businesses in the stock market, right? So, like, when I invest in businesses in the stock market, essentially what I'm doing is I go read everything I can about a company, and then I, like, assess, how much money I think is likely to come out of the business over its lifetime. And then I try to invest in the business at a substantial discount to what I think that assessment is likely to be. And that can be difficult to do, but that's pretty much what I'm doing. And so most of the time I can't make a bet, right?
Yeah.
But occasionally I can. And then I'm not afraid to, like, bet quite large when I do that. So, like, when Francis Ngannou fought Tyson Fury, it wasn't as big a bet as I wanted to put on when Conor fought Floyd, because Francis Ngannou is much bigger. So there was more of a risk that he could actually knock out Tyson Fury. But
what was the weight discrepancy between the two of them?
They were pretty close in terms
Oh,
of
they were
weight.
close. Okay.
They were close in terms of weight, yeah. But it's just the absolute size of Francis Ngannou. Like heavyweight fights lead to knockouts more often
Right.
than like flyweight fights, for example. It's just the way that the way your jaw works is when you get hit really hard, you go down, and those guys hit harder.
Yeah.
So but I put a big bet on. I bet like 25,000 or so on the outcome there, which went my way. Right, Francis Ngannou shocked the world, and he still lost. So and then I bet again when Francis Ngannou fought Anthony Joshua. I bet again on Anthony Joshua, and I bet a large amount again, and that went my way as well. And yeah, I don't know. I've done pretty well. So
do you like these kind of MMA
like free
guys? Money. No. I just meant like as a fan, I know, hey, who doesn't like free money? But as a fan, do you like watching these fights or this whole thing where you got influencers getting into boxing, and then you got guys in MMA transitioning over? You get enjoyment out of that? I've always wondered what people's take was on that.
I'm not. I didn't watch Francis Ngannou fight Tyson Fury, even though I had $25,000 on it. So, and I didn't watch Francis Ngannou fight Anthony Joshua either. So I wouldn't know if I enjoy it or not, because that wasn't the reason why. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I'm not that interested in it. Like, I watched the UFC. I like watching like elite competition at the top level. I didn't think Francis Ngannou was like an elite level boxer, so I wasn't interested in watching like those two guys box. Yeah. I would be much more interested, for example, and I didn't watch this either, but I was much closer to buying the pay-per-view for Tyson Fury versus Usyk, right? Like that was interesting to me, but I still didn't watch it. So yeah.
If anybody ever wants to jump in the BBZ Discord, I know you do a lot of UFC sweating whenever there's a big card on the Saturday. So if you're a subscriber, don't miss out on that.
For sure. Yeah, I'm in there. I'm in there for that, for sure.
Yeah. Cool little thing. I'm just trying to think. I think we could probably wrap it there.
Cool.
Yeah, this was fun. You can expect from this podcast similar conversations. We're going to talk about a lot of poker related topics. Try to not talk so much about maybe some other dark things that may have came up in this episode. I didn't think we were going to take a turn there, but that's okay. It was a good conversation. We're going to have some guests, and yeah, you can look forward to that in the coming weeks. So thank you, Jordan, for your time. This was good. This was fun. And yeah, we'll call it there.
Thank you, Jake.
All right. Have a good one.
You too, brother.